Hello dear students, hope you are all doing great. I welcome you all to this session, Sample versus Census. This session will help you to understand the advantages of sample and census along with the situations where we prefer sample and census. Before we begin with advantage, we must recall what is sample and what is census. In a research, we are generally interested in studying or understanding the characteristics of a population. I want to conduct a basic study with residents of Hubli to understand whether they would prefer to visit the hill stations in their vacations or to what extent the residents of Hubli prefer to visit hill stations in their summer vacations. Now I need to collect their preferences. How do I do that? Basically, I have two ways. First is, what I do is, I go and approach each and every family in Hubli and collect their preference. Let's imagine we have around 2 lakh families residing in Hubli. What I do is, I go and approach each and every family and collect their preference. Here what am I doing is, I am collecting the information from every element in the population. So whenever I collect the preferences or information from every element in the population, the survey is called census. Here we are not leaving any stone untouched. We are collecting information from each and every possible respondent in the population. But as we all know, this consumes a lot of time as well as the resources. So the preferred other way is, I select a subset of 2000 families from the list of population. I do approach those 2000 families, collect their preference, and I finally generalize the result or observation with the whole population. So this method of selecting a subset from existing population is called sample. Here it is very important that the sample selected must be a perfect representative of population. If 75% of families belong to upper income level and 25% of families belong to lower income level, then the sample selected must have the same proportion. Then only we can call the sample as perfect representative of population. Now let's study the advantages of sample. The first advantage is sample always saves time and cost. Let's pick up an example that we are interested in estimating the monthly average household expenditure on food items by the people of Delhi. It is known that the population of Delhi is approximately 1.2 crores. Now, if we assume that there are 5 members per household, it would mean that the population comprises of approximately 24 lakh households. So collecting the data on the expenditure of each of these 24 lakh households on food items would be a very time consuming and expensive exercise. This is because you will need to hire a number of investigators and train them before you conduct the survey on that 24 lakh households. Instead, if a sample of say 2000 households is selected, the task would not only be finished faster but will be inexpensive as well. Just imagine collecting the information from 24 lakh families. That's tedious. Yes, probably we may get the accurate results, but the question is, do we have that much time? And do we have that much resources to spend? And the answer is clear no. So the sample saves time as well as cost. Let's move ahead to second point. Many times a decision maker may not have too much of time to wait till all the information is available. Therefore, a sample could come to his rescue. Most of the times the decision maker doesn't have too much of time to wait and take a decision, especially in the times of contingencies and emergencies. Probably he may just have hours to take a decision. So he cannot keep on waiting till you collect the information from the whole census or the whole population. So at that time, collecting information from sample is apt. Let's look at the third advantages of considering sample. There are situations where a sample is the only option. When we want to estimate the average life of fluorescent bulbs, what is done is that they are burnt out completely. If we go for a complete enumeration, there would not be anything left out for use. One more example. We could be testing the quality of photographic film. To test the quality, we need to expose it completely, and the moment it is exposed, it gets destroyed. Therefore, sometimes sample is the only choice. The next point is collecting information using sample will always give us reliable results by reducing the data collection errors. Let me elaborate a bit. The study of a sample instead of complete enumeration may at times produce more reliable results. Just because by studying a sample, the fatigue is reduced and fewer errors occur while collecting the data, especially whenever a large number of elements are involved. Yes, most of the times it so happens with students, whenever I ask you to collect the information from a huge set of sample, what you do is you consider the most convenient ways to fill out the information, probably which would never give us reliable results. So whenever we have a sample, a small number of respondents, the interest of the investigator is respected. So we can expect very few errors in collecting the information, which will help us to get the reliable results. Now, does that mean every researcher must collect information only through the way of samples? And the answer is no. Let us look at the advantages of preferring census over sample. Let's look at the first advantage. A census is appropriate whenever the population size is small. For an example, let's consider the number of public sector banks of the country. Suppose me as a researcher is interested in collecting information from the top management of a bank regarding their views on monetary policies which are announced by RBI. In this case, a complete enumeration may be possible as the population size is not very large. So let me keep it very simple, guys. If at all you want to conduct a research and the population size itself is 100, then 100 is never a big number to collect the response. So whenever the population size is small or whenever we have enough resources and time to collect information, we must prefer the census. The next advantage of selecting census is whenever we have heterogeneity in variables of population. Yes, you may have a question, what is heterogeneity? It is nothing but the quality or state of being diverse in its own characters or contents. Let me elaborate with an example. Consider we have a business school having few students from different continents across the globe. That is, students from Europe, students from East Africa, students from Southeast Asia, students from Middle East. So these students would have their own problems in settling down in the Indian environment, probably because of the differences in social, cultural, and environmental factors. Yes, we do observe this. Now, to understand their concerns, a survey of population may be appropriate. That is, here you need to go for census method. That is, you need to collect the information from whole population. Now the question is, why should we not go for sample here? The answer is simple. You are expected to receive altogether different results from different respondents. So here the heterogeneity in variables of population is observed, and whenever we are expected to get the heterogeneous results or diversified results or responses from the respondents, we must prefer the census. So this gives you an idea about what are the advantages of selecting sample and what are the advantages of selecting census. As you can see that the points which are noted with blue mark are advantages of sample, and the points which are marked with red are advantages of census. Hope things are clear to all with the examples that I have quoted. Now let's move ahead to understand the conditions favoring the use of sample as well as census. That is, the different situations where we must select sample or census. Now the first criteria of our study is budget. Budget here simply means the funds allocated for conducting the research. In business arena, every organizations have to be involved in research. Research may be probably to enhance their performance or to scale themselves compared to competitors. But yes, it's also a fact that each and every organization cannot afford to spend more on their research. So it's very simple. If the budget for research is small, then the responses have to be collected from samples. If the budget of your research is large, you can collect the information from census. I repeat, whenever the budgets Whenever the budget allocated to research is small, the responses have to be collected using sample, and whenever the budget allocated to research is large, the information or responses can be collected for the whole whole census. Then the second criteria is time available. How much time do we have to take a decision? Do we have enough time? Yes, we can go for much accurate results by doing a survey on census. No, if we don't have enough time, we need to take a quick call. We need to decide on something very quickly. Then we have no other choice than selecting sample to collect information. The third criteria is population size. Whenever the population size is large, then we must go for samples. Whenever the population size is small, then census would be the most apt option. That is, whenever we have large population to be surveyed, it is very difficult to reach out to each and every respondent. At that time, we must select a subset of population, which is called sample, which is a representative of all the characteristics of population. We have to prefer sample. Whenever the population size is small, let me quote you numbers again. Whenever the population is in terms of lakhs and crores, it is very difficult practically to reach out to each and every respondent and collect information. At that time, we need to collect the information from a sample. If at all, the population size itself is in 100, probably even thousands, it is possible to reach out to each and every respondent and collect the information. Remember, census would always give us the accurate results compared to a survey with sample. So if at all the population size is small, census is always preferred. The next criteria is variance in the characteristics. That simply means how different is each and every element in the population. I repeat, variance in characteristics simply means how different is each and every element of your population. So wherever there are small variances in the characteristics, that is, very less differences observed among the elements of population, sampling is a preferred method because the representativeness is quite high. And wherever the variance in the characteristics are large, that is, when you find each and every respondent as a different element in the population, the representativeness of sample is very difficult. So at that time, the census is preferred over sampling. I repeat, wherever we find there are a lot of differences in the elements of population who turn out to be the actual respondents, we must prefer census. So the next criteria of study is cost of sampling errors. Now the question is, what is sampling error? Let me keep it very simple. No matter how effective we are in selecting a sample, we definitely do observe a bit of differences or lack of complete representativeness of a sample with its population. So this difference is nothing but sampling error. The sampling error arises from the fact that only a part of population is used for estimation. That is, the sample selected doesn't exactly represent the population. The characteristics of sample differs a bit from the actual characteristics of population. So whenever we feel there is no much differences in characteristics of population along with sample, we must prefer the sampling or sample to collect information. Or wherever we feel there are huge differences in the characteristics of sample along with its population, we must prefer to collect information from a census. So the next criteria of study is cost of non-sampling errors. Again the question is, what is non-sampling error? Sampling error is caused whenever the researcher makes a mistake in selecting the subset which doesn't have characteristics of population. But non-sampling error is usually caused by a respondent whenever he fails to give the proper response. So let me repeat. The non-sampling errors are usually caused by the inaccurate responses that are provided by the respondents. So let's look at an example. I want to understand the perception of you all in the class. What if I bring 60 questionnaires and distribute it to you all? What you do is, you're already frustrated with the classes, so you ask your friend to fill the information on your behalf. Or even if you do fill it, you may not probably give me the accurate answers. But if I do the same with only 5 questionnaires and distribute 5 questionnaires to different students, even those 5 feel privileged. So what they do is, they take a decent time and try to provide the most accurate information. So wherever we feel there can be higher inaccuracy in providing responses, we must prefer sample. And wherever we feel there is lower inaccuracy in providing the answers or responses, we must prefer census. Let me keep it very simple. Higher the responses, higher may be the possibility of getting errors in the responses you collect. So whenever we limit the number of respondents, we always have higher probability of getting accurate results which we desire. So whenever we expect higher errors from respondents, we must prefer sampling. If at all we feel there can be very low gauge of errors from respondents, we must prefer census. However, we must agree to the fact that we cannot reduce the non-sampling errors to 0. We will study the sampling and non-sampling errors in a different topic as well. The next criteria of study is nature of measurement. If it is destructive, then we must prefer sample. If it is non-destructive, then we must prefer census. Now what does this mean? Let me explain you all with an example. Here the destructive nature simply means consumption or contamination of the product prepared. As I was about to quote an example of the product tests. If we want to do a pioneer study of mobile phone to be launched in next month, how do we test it? It has to be consumed or it has to be used. So that's nothing but the destructive nature of measurement. Here, how many mobile phones can we produce and supply them as free samples to be tested, the number has to be less. So the number is very less for all those products which are to be tested. So wherever the nature of measurement is destructive, that is, a material has to be either consumed or contaminated in order to measure it, we have to select a very smaller number, that is a sample. If at all we feel the nature of measurement is non-destructive, that is, despite testing that material or good, it is not being harmed, we can go for the method of census. The final criteria under study is attention to individual cases. What is the extent that each and every response is important to you? If at all you feel each and every response is important, then please select a smaller number, because practically it looks difficult to do a survey or collect the information from the whole population. So if at all you feel the attention to individual cases is high, then you must collect the information from a sample. If at all you feel the attention to individual cases is not that high, then you may go for collecting information through the method of census, that is probably trying to collect the information from the whole population. So these are the points where we prefer sample or census. So this is all from me about sample versus census. Thank you. Have a nice day.